Have you ever wondered why you keep searching for answers that may never come? Why this feeling of emptiness persists even when everything seems to be in place? There's something inside us that's not satisfied with shallow explanations, that demands more than routine can offer. What if the problem isn't the lack of an answer, but the very question we're asking the universe? Albert Camus, one of the greatest thinkers of the last century, dedicated his life to exploring this discomfort. He realized that human beings live in a strange tension. We want life to make sense, but the world remains silent in the face of our anguish. This distance between what we want and what we find is the central theme of the philosophy we're going to explore now. Prepare yourself for a journey that may shake some certainties, but that can also free you from many illusions. We're going to talk about the absurdity of existence and how, paradoxically, recognizing this absurdity can make us freer and more alive than ever. And check out our exclusive material in the first pinned comment. Since childhood, you've probably looked at the starry sky and felt small. Maybe you stayed awake at night trying to understand what came before the universe, or why you were born right now, in this time, in this body. These questions aren't just childish curiosity. They're the awakening of consciousness to something disturbing. The world exists, you exist, but nobody seems to know exactly why. It's as if life were a book without a preface, where you were thrown into the middle of the story without having read the previous pages. Camus called this awakening the recognition of the abyss. It's the moment when we realize we're here, thrown into existence, without an instruction manual. We look around and see mountains, oceans, cities, people, but none of this explains the reason we're alive. It's like shouting in a cave and not hearing even the echo of your own voice. The silence of the universe in the face of our questions is deafening. Imagine a traveler lost in the desert. He walks for days, looking for signs of civilization, but all he finds is sand and more sand. There are no footprints, no ruins, no signs that anyone has passed through there. This is the human condition according to Camus. We're born in a desert of meaning, where we look for clues to tell us what to do, how to live, what the purpose of all this is. But the desert doesn't answer. It just keeps being a desert. This abyss between us and the world isn't something we can ignore for long. We can distract ourselves, fill life with commitments and tasks, but at some point the question comes back. It arises in lonely early mornings, in moments of pause, when the external noise quiets down and we're alone with our thoughts. It's in this silence that we feel the weight of existence. Camus didn't see this as a defect of life, but as the starting point for a true philosophy. For him, recognizing this abyss is the first step toward living authentically. Pretending it doesn't exist is living on the surface, in illusion. Facing it head-on is diving into the depth of what it means to be human. And it's precisely in this dive that we begin to understand something fundamental about ourselves. Night has always been a powerful symbol of the unknown. When it gets dark, we lose the visual references that guide us during the day. It's in darkness that the most primitive fears arise, but it's also in it that we discover we can walk even without seeing the path. The existential abyss is like this night, frightening, but also revealing. It forces us to develop other senses, other ways of orienting ourselves in life. This awareness doesn't come all at once. It sets in gradually, like a shadow that grows as the sun sets. First, you might feel just a vague discomfort, a feeling that something doesn't fit. Then, the question becomes clearer. What am I doing here? Where am I going? What's the meaning of all this? There's a specific moment in many people's lives when this question explodes with full force. It could be in adolescence, when we start questioning everything we were taught. It could be in middle age, when we realize that half of life has passed and we still haven't found the answers we were looking for. It could be in a moment of loss, when death reminds us of the fragility of everything. It doesn't matter when it happens. What matters is that, when it happens, nothing goes back to being as it was before. You're in traffic, going home after another ordinary day. You look at the other cars, at the people passing by hurriedly on the sidewalk, and suddenly you get that strange feeling. We're all here, doing the same things, day after day. But why? What's the meaning of this repetition? Tomorrow, you'll wake up, work, go home, sleep, and then start over. And so on for decades. For what? Or you're at a party, surrounded by people, animated conversations, laughter. But inside, you feel an emptiness that no music can fill. You look around and notice that everyone seems to know what they're doing, as if there were a secret script for life that only you didn't receive. The question whispers in the back of your mind, is there more than this? Is this all there is? These situations aren't rare. They're universal experiences that cross cultures and eras. From the ancient Greeks to modern thinkers, humanity faces this same restlessness. The difference is that often we don't have words to express what we feel. We're alone with this anguish, thinking we're the only ones going through this, but we're not. The question about the meaning of existence is like a seed that germinates in fertile soil. Once planted, it doesn't stop growing. You can try to pull it out, ignore it, cover it with other concerns, but it's still there, taking root deeper and deeper. And the more you live, the more you realize this question isn't a passing problem. It's part of the structure of human consciousness. In youth, we might believe we'll find the answers as we mature. We think adults know something we haven't discovered yet. But when we reach adulthood, we realize they don't know either. Our parents, our teachers, our leaders, everyone is improvising, trying to make sense of things the way they can. Nobody has a reliable map. We're all navigating in the dark, using the stars when they appear, and hoping not to get completely lost. This discovery can be devastating. It's like discovering the pilot of the plane doesn't know how to fly either, that the doctor doesn't understand the disease either, that the guide is as lost as you are. The feeling is of abandonment, of being adrift in an ocean with no shore in sight. And it's precisely at this moment that many of us enter into crisis, because we realize there's no higher authority that can give us the answers. We're on our own. Camus observed that this restlessness isn't a defect of human beings, but their noblest characteristic. We're the only species that questions its own existence. A dog doesn't wonder why it's a dog. A tree doesn't doubt its purpose. But we, humans, have this strange and painful ability to distance ourselves from life to observe it from outside. And in this distancing, doubt arises. What Camus called absurd is born exactly from this dynamic. It's not something external to us. It's not a characteristic of the universe itself. The absurd happens in the meeting between two elements. On one side, the human being who desperately wants life to make sense. On the other, the world that remains silent, indifferent, offering facts but never meanings. It's like knocking on a door that never opens, calling a name that never answers. Think of a child who asks their parents, "Why is the sky blue?" The parents explain about light dispersion, about air molecules, about physics. The child then asks, "But why does light disperse like this?" The parents explain the laws of nature. The child insists, "But why do these laws exist?" And so we arrive at a point where there are no more scientific answers. Science explains the how, but not the ultimate why. The world works in a certain way, but it doesn't tell us why it works this way and not another way. This is the limit that Camus identified. We can understand the mechanisms of reality, we can describe, predict, manipulate, but when we ask about the deep meaning, the final purpose, we hit an insurmountable wall. The universe simply is. It doesn't justify its existence, it doesn't offer reasons, it doesn't care if we're confused or desperate. It keeps existing, indifferent to our anguish. Imagine two friends trying to communicate, but speaking completely different languages. One speaks passionately, gesturing, trying to make himself understood. The other just looks without comprehending, returning an empty gaze. There's no hostility, no refusal, just the total impossibility of connection. That's how Camus saw our relationship with the world. We speak the language of meaning, of intentions, of purposes. The world speaks the language of facts, of physical necessity, of chance. and these languages don't translate. The absurd is not, therefore, a pessimistic conclusion about life. It's just the honest acknowledgement of a real situation. We live in this permanent tension between what we desire and what we find. We want order, but we see chaos. We want justice, but we see injustice. We want our life to have cosmic importance, but we're just a tiny point in a gigantic universe that probably doesn't even notice our presence. Many people, upon reaching this perception, feel dizzy. It's like being at the top of a very tall building and looking down. The ground seems too far away, and you feel you might fall at any moment. This existential vertigo is what Camus called the experience of the absurd. It's not an abstract concept we study in books. It's something visceral that we feel in our stomach, that keeps us awake, that makes us question whether it's worth continuing. But here's the crucial point that Camus wanted us to understand. Recognizing the absurd doesn't mean giving up. On the contrary, it's just the beginning of a new way of living. Because once we stop looking for a meaning that doesn't exist, once we accept this fundamental condition of existence, something interesting happens. We're free to create our own path. The absurd isn't a problem to be solved. It's not an equation we can solve and move on. It's a permanent condition, like gravity. There's no point in being upset because gravity exists. You're not going to be able to eliminate it. But you can learn to live with it, to use it even, to find beauty in the fact that things fall. In the same way, the absurd isn't going away, but we can learn to dance with it, to make it not an obstacle, but part of the choreography of life. Faced with this acknowledgement of the absurd, Camus observed that humanity usually follows two main paths. The first is escape through blind faith. When reason can't provide answers, many people hand over their doubts to a religious or ideological authority that promises to know everything. It's comforting to believe that someone has the answers, that there's a divine plan, that everything makes sense even if we don't understand it now. This escape isn't necessarily bad in all cases. Religion can bring comfort, community, purpose. But Camus warned about the danger of faith that requires you to turn off your own capacity to question. When you accept ready-made answers without examining them, when you blindly obey dogmas that can't be questioned, you're betraying your own consciousness. It's like blindfolding yourself so you don't see the abyss. You might feel safer, but you're living in an illusion. The second path is nihilism, the conclusion that if nothing has meaning, then nothing matters. If there are no absolute values, then anything goes. This is a strong temptation, especially when we're tired of searching. It's easier to say that everything is empty, that there's no difference between right and wrong, that we're just atoms moving without purpose. At least this way we stop worrying. But Camus saw nihilism as another form of escape. It's giving up the fight, throwing your weapons on the ground, and accepting defeat. The nihilist looks at the absurd and says, since there's no meaning, I'm going to stop really living. I'm just going to exist, consume, pass the time until I die. It's a complete surrender, a form of death in life. The person keeps breathing, but their spirit has already given up. Between these two extremes, Camus proposed a third way. He called it tragic lucidity. It's the courage to look the absurd directly in the eyes, recognize it, accept it, but still continue living with intensity and dignity. It's saying, yes, there's no ready-made meaning. Yes, the universe is indifferent. Yes, I'm going to die and be forgotten. But while I'm here, I'm going to live as fully as possible. Imagine 3 people in a sinking boat. The first closes their eyes and prays, hoping a divine force will come save them. They refuse to look at the water coming in, convinced that faith will protect them. The second person panics, gives up on everything, and throws themselves in the water to end the suffering quickly. The third person looks at the situation clearly, recognizes the danger, but uses the time they have to try to fix the boat, or at least to appreciate the sunset while they can still see it. This third person is what Camus called the absurd man. They don't delude themselves with false hopes, but they don't surrender to despair either. They live with open eyes, conscious of the tragedy, but still capable of finding beauty and dignity in the effort. It's a difficult position to maintain because it requires constant strength. It's easier to choose the blindness of faith or the paralysis of nihilism. Blind faith offers us comfort, but at the price of our freedom to think. When we accept ready-made answers without questioning them, we're outsourcing our existential responsibility. We're saying that another person or institution knows better than we do what we should do, think, feel. It's an enormous relief not to have to decide for yourself, but it's also a betrayal of your own consciousness. Nihilism, on the other hand, offers us a form of rest. If nothing matters, then we don't need to make an effort. We don't need to make difficult choices. We don't need to commit to values. We don't need to take responsibility. We can float through life like leaves in the wind, without direction, without purpose. It's an empty freedom, a freedom that doesn't liberate, but imprisons in indifference. Camus believed that both choices were forms of philosophical suicide. Blind faith kills questioning, which is the essence of conscious human beings. Nihilism kills the will to live authentically, which is what separates us from inert objects. Both are shortcuts to avoid the hard work of living with the absurd without fleeing from it. Tragic lucidity, on the other hand, requires constant courage. It's waking up every day knowing there are no guarantees, that there's no manual, that you're improvising. It's making choices, knowing there's no objectively right choice. It's loving knowing you're going to lose. It's building knowing everything will crumble. It's creating knowing your creation won't change the universe. And still doing all this seriously, with dedication, with passion. Think of a gardener who plants flowers knowing they're going to wither. He could say, "Why plant if everything's going to die?" But he plants anyway. Not because he believes the flowers are eternal, but because he finds beauty in the act of planting, in the process of caring, in the brief moment when the flowers bloom. He lives intensely in the present, without illusions about the future. This is the wisdom that Camus tried to teach us. It's not a wisdom that solves the problem of existence. It's a wisdom that teaches us to live with the problem, to make it not an unbearable weight, but part of the texture of life. Like learning to walk even knowing that gravity pulls down. Like learning to breathe even knowing that oxygen is limited. Like learning to live even knowing that death is inevitable. And here's one of Camus' most liberating ideas. When we recognize there's no given meaning, we realize there's also no given prison. If the universe doesn't impose a purpose on us, then we're free to create our own. If there's no written script, then we can write our own script. The absence of meaning is, paradoxically, the source of our deepest freedom. Think about how much of your life you've spent trying to figure out what you should do. Should you follow the career your parents wanted? Should you get married and have children? Because that's what's expected. Should you accumulate money because society says that's success? Should you be religious because you were born into a religious family? All these shoulds come from outside. They're scripts written by other people. When Camus says that life is absurd, he's saying that these scripts don't have real authority over you. They're human constructs, not cosmic truths. You shouldn't do anything. You can do whatever you want. And that's both terrifying and liberating, because now the responsibility is all yours. You can't blame God, fate, society. It's you who chooses. This absurd freedom is heavy. Many people prefer not to carry it. It's more comfortable to follow the rules, to do what's expected, to live on autopilot. But Camus invites us to embrace the weight of this freedom, because it's only by carrying it that we become truly human. It's only by choosing for ourselves that we become authors of our own story. Imagine you discover you're in a game, but there are no fixed rules, no final objective, no way to win or lose. At first, you're confused. How do you play a game without rules? But then you realize, I can create my own rules. I can invent my own objectives. I can decide what winning means to me. And suddenly, the game becomes much more interesting, because it's truly yours. This lightness arises when we stop seeking approval from the universe. The universe isn't going to applaud your achievements. It won't console you in your failures. It won't say you made the right choices, but that also means you don't need its approval. You don't need to prove anything to anyone except yourself. And this freedom from having to justify your existence is incredible. Camus observed that many people spend their entire lives waiting for permission to live. Permission from family, from society, from God, from fate. They wait for a sign that it's okay to be who they are, to do what they want to do. But that sign never comes because there's nobody out there to send it. The only permission that matters is the one you give yourself. When you understand this, something changes. You stop comparing yourself so much with others because you realize everyone is playing a different game. You stop chasing achievements that mean nothing to you just because they mean something to others. You start living from the inside out instead of from the outside in. And that's liberating in a way that no religion or ideology can offer. To illustrate everything we're discussing, Camus chose a character from Greek mythology, Sisyphus. You might know the story. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to push an enormous stone to the top of a mountain. Each time he reached the top, the stone rolled back down, and he had to start over, again, and again, and again, forever. At first glance, it seems like the saddest and most hopeless story possible. It's the perfect image of futility, of meaningless effort, of eternal repetition that leads nowhere. The gods invented this punishment precisely to be cruel, to take away any hope of progress or redemption. Sisyphus works eternally, and his work produces nothing. It's the nightmare of absolute uselessness. But Camus did something unexpected with this myth. He said, Sisyphus is happy, and this shocking statement is the heart of the philosophy of the absurd. How can someone in such an obviously miserable situation be happy? This is where we need to understand what Camus was really saying. Sisyphus is happy not despite his condition, but because he understood and accepted his condition. Think about it. While Sisyphus was revolted by his punishment, while he hoped the gods would forgive him, while he believed that one day the stone would stay at the top, he was miserable. Each time the stone rolled back was a new disappointment, a new confirmation of his failure. But when Sisyphus stopped expecting a different ending, when he accepted that this is the nature of his existence, something changed. Now, when the stone rolls down the mountain, Sisyphus calmly descends after it. This moment of descent is crucial. It's the moment when he's free from the task, the moment when he can think, can breathe, can look around. And it's in this moment that he becomes conscious of his situation. He knows what awaits him. He knows he's going to push the stone again. He knows it's going to roll again. And he's at peace with that. Can you see how this connects with human life? We're all Sisyphus. We wake up, work, sleep, wake up again. We build things that fall apart. We make meals that become hunger a few hours later. We clean the house that's going to get dirty again. We solve problems that are soon replaced by new problems. Our life is a series of tasks that repeat, that never truly end. And if we look at this the wrong way, it can seem depressing. Why clean if it's going to get dirty? Why eat if I'm going to be hungry again? Why live if I'm going to die? But this is a way of thinking that expects life to be something it's not. Life isn't a ladder we climb until we reach a final point of fulfillment. Life is a cycle of experiences that repeat in variations. Sisyphus carrying his stone is you going to work every day. It's you taking care of your relationships, which always need maintenance. It's you seeking knowledge, knowing there will always be more to learn. It's you creating art, knowing the work will never be perfect. It's you being kind, knowing there will always be more opportunities for kindness. The question isn't whether the stone will stay at the top. The question is how you carry the stone. With despair or with dignity? With revolt or with acceptance? With the feeling of being punished or with the awareness of exercising your freedom? Because even in an imposed task, there's freedom in how you execute it. Camus says we should imagine Sisyphus happy, not because he's deluded, not because he invented a fantasy that the stone will one day stay at the top, but because he understood that happiness isn't in the final result. It's in the process, in the effort, in the engagement with the task. It's in the awareness of being alive, of doing something, even if that something doesn't have an ultimate purpose. There's a strange beauty in effort without reward. It's a gesture of pure freedom. You're not doing that for gain, for fame, for divine recognition. You're doing it because you chose to do it. Because while you live, while you breathe, you do something with your existence. And that's enough. It doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't need to change the world. It just needs to be genuine. Think of the people you admire. Many of them are probably admirable not for the results they achieved, but for the persistence with which they pursue something. The artist who keeps creating even when nobody sees their work. The teacher who keeps teaching even when students seem disinterested. The gardener who takes care of plants even knowing they're going to die in winter. There's dignity in this persistence. Sisyphus, in the moment he descends the mountain, is totally conscious. He's not distracted. He's not thinking about something else. He's present with his reality. And this presence, this lucidity, is what Camus called revolt. Not a revolt that tries to destroy the order of things, but a revolt that refuses to flee from reality. A revolt that says, I see you, absurd. I recognize you, and still I choose to continue. This is the most courageous gesture possible. It's not the courage of someone who believes they're going to win. It's the courage of someone who knows there's no final victory and still doesn't give up. It's continuing to dance even when the music stopped. It's continuing to walk even when there's no destination. It's continuing to love even when everything is temporary. It's continuing to live even when death is certain. If you stop to observe the moments when you feel the absurdity of life most intensely, you'll probably notice a pattern. These moments arise in stillness. When the rush stops, when the noise quiets down, when you're alone with yourself. It's in boredom, in emptiness, that the absurd reveals itself most clearly. And our modern society has an enormous fear of these moments. We live in a culture of constant distraction. There's always something to do, watch, buy, consume. If a moment of silence arises, we grab our phone. If we feel bored, we turn on the television. If emptiness appears, we fill it with anything. We do everything not to be alone with our thoughts. Because we know, even if unconsciously, that in these moments the difficult questions appear. But boredom isn't our enemy. It's a rigorous teacher that teaches us something fundamental. That all the agitation of life is, deep down, an attempt to escape the void. We work frantically, not just for money, but so we don't have to think. We fill our schedule with commitments, not just out of necessity, but so we don't have to feel. We talk non-stop, not just to communicate, but so we don't hear the inner silence. When you stop fleeing from boredom and allow it to simply exist, something interesting happens. At first, it's uncomfortable. It seems like something is wrong, that you should be doing something. But if you endure it, if you stay with the feeling without trying to eliminate it, it starts to transform. Boredom becomes contemplation. Emptiness becomes space. And in this space, you start to see more clearly. It's like looking at an agitated lake. The surface is full of waves, distorted reflections, constant movement. But when the water calms down, you can see the bottom. You can see what was there all along, but that the waves were hiding. Boredom calms the waves of the mind and lets you see what really exists. A life without external purpose, a self that doesn't quite know who it is, a present that passes without leaving a trace. This vision can be scary. That's why we flee. But Camus invites us not to flee. He suggests that emptiness, when welcomed, can teach us about what's essential. The essential isn't more things, more achievements, more validations. The essential is the quality of our presence, the honesty of our consciousness, the courage to exist without crutches. Imagine spending an entire day without distractions, without a phone, without internet, without books, without music. Just you and the present. Most people would find this torturous. But why? What's so scary about being with yourself? The answer is that without distractions, we're forced to face the empty nature of existence. And that hurts. But the pain is just the beginning. If you go through the pain, you arrive at a place of quietness. It's like going through a storm and arriving at a clearing. Inner silence isn't absence, it's full presence. It's being totally here, without escaping to the past or to the future. It's existing without stories, without false identities, without masks. This encounter with emptiness is what some mystics call a spiritual experience, but it doesn't need to have anything supernatural about it. It's simply the experience of being alive without intermediaries, without the mediation of constant thought, of the mental narration that comments on everything. It's being without having to be someone specific. It's existing without having to prove or justify your existence. Our modern society built a perfect trap, the cult of success and productivity. From a young age, we're taught that our value is in what we produce, in how much we achieve, in how we compare to others. This mentality transformed life into a frantic race where nobody can stop, because stopping is losing. You probably know this pressure well. You need to be productive. You need to reach goals. You need to constantly improve. You need to use your time efficiently. You need to have achievements to show. You need to have an impressive resume. You need to always be doing something that can be quantified, evaluated, compared. And if you're not doing any of this, you're wasting your life. But what Camus realized is that all this agitation is deep down a way to flee from the absurd. If you're always busy, you don't need to think. If you're always achieving, you don't need to question why you're achieving. If you're always competing, you don't need to ask if the competition makes sense. The constant doing prevents being, prevents reflection, prevents consciousness. Think about how many people you know who work a lot, earn well, have success according to social standards, but feel a deep emptiness inside. They arrived where they thought they should arrive, but didn't find the promised satisfaction. Because satisfaction was always in the next achievement, in the next level, in the next goal. And now they realize it's an endless game. The logic of productivity transforms everything into means to an end. You don't walk to appreciate the walk, but to burn calories or hit a goal. You don't talk with a friend to be present, but to maintain networking. You don't read a book for pleasure, but to add something to your productive knowledge. Even rest becomes functional. You rest so you can produce better tomorrow. This mentality robs us of something essential, the capacity to simply be, to exist without purpose, without goal, without expected result, to do things that don't lead anywhere, that don't accumulate anything, that can't be transformed into a line on a resume. And without this capacity, we become machines, not humans. Efficient, perhaps, but empty. Camus invites us to question this logic. What's the value of an achievement in a life without ultimate meaning? If you become president, a billionaire, famous, does this change anything about the fundamental absurdity of existence? You continue being a human being, thrown into a universe that doesn't explain why you're here. Your achievements are real to you and to other humans, but they're invisible to the cosmos. This doesn't mean achievements don't matter. It means they matter in a different way than we were taught. They matter because you chose that they mattered, not because there's a cosmic meter of success. They matter for the journey, not for the destination. They matter for the way you pursued them, not for what they add to your value as a human being. When you understand this, the pressure decreases. You don't need to be exceptional. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to be constantly climbing an invisible mountain. You can choose to live in a simpler, more present, more authentic way. You can do things just because you like them, not because they're productive. You can waste time, because time isn't a currency that needs to yield profit. If there's something that can bring warmth to the cold of the absurd, it's love. But not the fantastical romantic love of comedies, full of promises of eternal happiness. The love Camus had in mind is simpler and deeper. The capacity to create genuine bonds with other human beings who are also lost in this universe without meaning. When you recognize the absurdity of your own existence, and then look at another person and recognize that they also carry this weight, something opens up, a form of compassion, of solidarity. We're all in this leaky boat, all trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. And there's a strange beauty in sharing this condition. Think about the relationships that really matter to you. They're probably not those based on utility or convenience. They're those where you can be truly yourself, where you don't need to pretend you have all the answers, where you can be fragile and confused and still be accepted. They're the relationships where the other doesn't try to save you or fix you, but simply is present with you in the chaos. Absurd love doesn't promise eternity. It doesn't promise to solve your problems. It doesn't promise to complete you or give meaning to your life. It simply offers company on the journey. It's saying to another person, I don't know what we're doing here, but I'm happy to be lost by your side. It's finding beauty in the fact that two separate consciousnesses choose to connect, even knowing everything is temporary. There's something revolutionary in loving without illusions. Loving knowing the person is going to change, that you're going to fight, that maybe you won't stay together forever, that one day death will separate you, and still choosing to love, choosing to care, choosing to be present. It's a gesture of pure freedom, because it's not based on any guarantee. Moments of true affection are often simple: a deep conversation in the early morning, a comfortable silence in someone's company, a shared laugh about something only you two understand, a small gesture of care when you're having a difficult day. These moments don't save you from the absurd, but they make the absurd more bearable. Camus talked a lot about solidarity among those who recognize the absurd. There's a silent brotherhood among those who looked at the void and didn't look away. You can find this person in a bar, in a library, in a square. You recognize each other by the look, by a certain way of being in the world. You don't need to talk about philosophy. The connection is deeper than words. And it's not just in romantic relationships or deep friendships that love matters. It's also in the small everyday gestures of humanity: holding the door for someone, smiling at a stranger, helping someone who's lost, being kind even when nobody's looking. These gestures don't change the fact that the universe is indifferent, but they create small islands of warmth in a cold ocean. Love is also a form of resistance to the absurd. When the universe doesn't care about you, caring about another person is an act of rebellion. It's saying, even if nothing matters cosmically, I choose that this matters to me. It's creating value in a universe without value. It's planting flowers in a desert. If there's a silent answer to the absurd, that answer is art. Not because art explains the universe or offers easy consolation, but because it transforms chaos into form. It takes suffering, confusion, lack of meaning, and creates something from it. It's a gesture of pure human creation in a universe that didn't ask for it. The artist is like Sisyphus, but instead of pushing stone, he creates. He writes a book knowing it will be forgotten. He paints a painting knowing it will fade. He composes music knowing the sound dissipates in the air. Nothing he creates changes the fundamental fact of the absurd. The universe remains indifferent, and still he creates. There's something profoundly courageous in this. The artist looks at the void and says, I'm going to fill this, even if temporarily. I'm going to give form to the formless. I'm going to create beauty where there was no beauty. Not because I believe this will last forever or that it will save someone, but because it's what I can do. It's my way of responding to the silence. You don't need to be a professional artist to understand this. Every time you cook a meal with care, even knowing it will be consumed and forgotten, you're making an artistic gesture. Every time you arrange your room in a way you find beautiful, even knowing it will get messy again, you're creating. Every time you write something, photograph something, build something, however small, you're participating in this act of absurd creation. Art doesn't need to have a message. It doesn't need to teach a lesson. It doesn't need to change the world. It can simply exist as testimony that a human being was here and chose to create instead of destroy, chose form instead of chaos, chose beauty instead of indifference. It's a mark that says, I existed and this mattered to me, even if it doesn't matter to the universe. Camus saw artistic creation as one of the purest forms of absurd freedom. The artist isn't waiting for divine approval. He's not following a manual of how art should be. He's simply expressing something that needs to be expressed, giving form to something that needs form. It's a dialogue with the void, where the void doesn't respond, but the conversation itself has value. Think about all the great works of art, of humanity. They didn't change the nature of the universe. The cosmos keeps expanding, stars keep dying, entropy keeps increasing. But they changed something in human experience. They offered moments of beauty, of reflection, of connection. They created shared meanings that bind us across time. When you read a book written 1,000 years ago and are moved, something extraordinary happens. You're connecting with a consciousness that also faced the absurd, that also wondered about the meaning of life, and that chose to respond by creating. You're no longer alone in the void. There are echoes of other voices, other searches, other efforts to make sense. We've spent a lot of time in the clouds of abstract thought. It's time to descend to the body, to the senses, to the concrete present. Because one of the most direct ways to deal with the absurd is simply to be here, now, completely present in the physical experience of being alive. When you're lost in thoughts about the meaning of life, do a simple exercise. Feel your body. Notice the sensation of air entering and leaving your lungs. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Notice the temperature of your skin, the tension of your muscles. Suddenly, you're no longer in the future or the past. You're no longer in philosophical abstractions. You're here. There's an ancient wisdom in this that many spiritual traditions already knew. When the mind doesn't find answers, go back to the body. The body doesn't care about existential questions, it simply feels. It has hunger, thirst, tiredness, pleasure, pain. These sensations are real in a way that no theory is. They anchor you in concrete existence. Camus had a special love for the sensory world. He grew up in Algeria, near the Mediterranean Sea, and many of his writings speak of the sun, the water, the light. He understood that there's a form of fullness that doesn't come from understanding life, but from living it through the senses, from feeling the warmth of the sun on your skin, from diving into the cold sea, from eating something delicious, from touching someone you love. These experiences don't explain anything. They don't offer philosophical meaning, but they offer something perhaps more important: presence. When you're truly feeling something, you're not thinking about the absurd. You're simply being. And this being is prior to any questioning. It's the raw material of existence. Think about when you eat something you really like. If you're present, if you pay attention, those moments are complete in themselves. The taste, the texture, the pleasure. It doesn't need external justification. It doesn't need to lead anywhere. It's simply good. And this simple goodness is a type of answer to the void. Not an intellectual answer, but a lived answer. Or when you hear music that moves you, you don't need to understand why those notes in that order produce that effect. You simply feel. The body responds, breathing changes, something moves inside. It's a direct experience, without intermediaries. It's life happening, not life being thought about. The same goes for touch. Hugging someone, feeling the warmth of another body, the texture of skin, or for aromas that evoke memories, that change your mood instantly, or for the experience of moving the body, dancing, walking, feeling the muscles working. All of this is real in a way that ideas never are. The spirituality of the body is different from the spirituality of the mind. It doesn't seek transcendence, it seeks immanence. It doesn't want to escape the world, it wants to dive into it. It doesn't want answers, it wants experiences. And maybe that's healthier, because the search for answers can become obsessive, but the search to be present is always achievable. You can always return to now. Camus called this love for life, not a blind love that ignores suffering, but a love that recognizes that, despite everything, despite the absurd, despite the lack of meaning, there are moments that are worthwhile, moments of sensory beauty, of simple pleasure, of being completely here. And maybe life doesn't need to be more than a collection of these moments. When you recognize the absurd and refuse to flee from it, something fundamental happens. You rebel. But it's not a violent or destructive rebellion. It's an ethical rebellion, a form of fidelity to truth. It's saying, I'm going to live with integrity, even without promise of reward. I'm going to be good, even if the universe doesn't care. I'm going to choose values even if they're not absolute. This is perhaps Camus' most important idea. Ethics doesn't need to come from God or universal laws to be real. It can come from our own consciousness, from our own choice. And in fact, a chosen ethic is nobler than an imposed ethic, because you're being good not out of fear of hell or hope of heaven, but because you chose to be good. Think about what this means. You can be kind to someone, even knowing nobody's going to reward you for it. You can be honest even when lying would be more advantageous. You can be just even when the universe is profoundly unjust. Why? Because you decided that's how you want to live, because that's how you respect yourself. The absurd rebellion isn't against specific people or systems. It's against the temptation to give up human dignity just because there are no guarantees. It's against the idea that if nothing matters objectively, then I can do anything. No, you still have to look in the mirror. You still have to live with yourself, and that matters. Camus saw a deep connection between recognizing the absurd and developing compassion. When you understand that everyone is in the same existential situation, that nobody has definitive answers, that everyone is trying to make sense of what doesn't make sense, it becomes harder to judge. It becomes easier to be kind, because you know that person is also lost, also suffering, also doing the best they can. The ethics of the absurd doesn't have rigid rules written in stone, but it has a central principle. Live in a way that you can respect yourself, not out of pride, but out of authenticity. Because in the end, when all the masks fall, when all the social games lose importance, you're alone with your choices. And they need to be choices you can carry with dignity. This doesn't mean being perfect. It means being honest, recognizing when you make mistakes, trying to do better. Not because someone is watching you and will punish you, but because you're watching yourself and need to be able to live with yourself. It's a form of integrity that comes from within, not from outside. There's something profoundly liberating in this. You don't need to follow rules that don't make sense to you. You don't need to obey authorities you don't respect. You don't need to pretend beliefs you don't have. You can build your own ethics based on what you truly value, on what truly matters to you. And this ethic will be stronger because it's truly yours. If there's something that completely structures our search for meaning, that something is death. It's the absolute limit, the boundary we can't cross while alive, the end that makes everything else provisional. And curiously, it's precisely the awareness of death that can give weight and value to life. Imagine if you were immortal. If you had infinite time, nothing would be urgent. You could do everything tomorrow, or in a century, or in a million years. Your choices wouldn't have weight because you could always undo them. Relationships wouldn't be precious because you'd have infinite time to meet infinite people. Nothing would be special because nothing would be limited. Death makes everything precious precisely because it makes everything finite. You have a limited number of days, a limited number of conversations, a limited number of times you'll see the sunset, and you don't know which of these is the last. This puts a silent urgency on every moment. Each choice matters because the time to choose is limited. Camus didn't see death as an enemy. He saw it as part of the structure of existence. It's not an accident that happens at the end of life. It's present from the beginning, shaping everything. Every second that passes is a second you'll never recover. Time is always running out. And this isn't tragic in the sense of being wrong. It's just how things are. Many people live as if they were immortal. They postpone dreams, postpone important conversations, postpone really living. There's always a tomorrow. There's always more time, until there isn't. And suddenly, they realize they spent decades waiting for the right moment that never came. Death reveals there's no right moment. There's only this moment. But there's something liberating in accepting finitude. When you truly understand you're going to die, certain things lose importance. Small offenses, silly worries, social fears. Why care about the opinion of people you barely know if you have limited time here? Why waste energy on insignificant dramas when each day is precious? Death also democratizes everything. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how powerful, how famous. You're going to die like everyone else. Kings and beggars end up in the same place. This puts things in perspective. Your achievements, which seem so important, will disappear. You will disappear. Everything you built will crumble. And that's okay, because it's like that for everyone. So we return to Camus and his central idea, revolt. But now, after everything we've explored, we can better understand what he meant. Revolt isn't shouting at the universe. It's not stamping your feet like a frustrated child. It's something more subtle and deeper. It's a posture before life. Revolt begins with lucidity. You see the absurd clearly. You see there's no given meaning, that the universe is indifferent, that you're going to die and be forgotten. You see all this without looking away. That's the first part. Many people stop here and fall into despair, but revolt goes beyond. The second part is refusal. Refusal to flee, refusal to accept passively, refusal to let yourself be crushed by the weight of the absurd. It's saying, I saw the absurd, I recognize the absurd, but I'm not going to surrender to it. I'm going to keep living, and I'm going to live with dignity. I'm going to create meaning, even knowing it's not absolute. I'm going to love even knowing everything passes. This refusal isn't irrational. It's not denying reality. It's choosing how to respond to reality. It's saying, yes, there are no guarantees. Yes, everything is temporary. But while I'm here, I'm going to make this worthwhile. I'm going to live as if life mattered, even if the universe suggests otherwise. It's a conscious bet on life against all evidence. Serene revolt isn't agitated. It doesn't need to shout. It's calm, but firm. It's like a tree that keeps growing even in rocky soil. It doesn't complain about the stones. It doesn't give up because the soil is difficult. It simply keeps growing, finding paths around obstacles, persisting not out of stubbornness, but because growing is its nature. Camus saw this revolt as a form of love for life. Not a blind love that ignores problems, but a lucid love that sees all the problems and still says yes. It's like loving a person with all their flaws, not despite them, but including them. It's accepting life as it is, limited and absurd, and still choosing to live it fully. This posture requires constant courage. It's not a decision you make once, and that's it. It's a choice you make every day, sometimes several times a day. When the absurd weighs heavy, when emptiness appears, when the lack of meaning makes itself present, you choose again. You choose to continue. You choose to find beauty. You choose to create value. On this solitary journey of recognizing the absurd, there's an unexpected consolation. You're not alone. Others also saw what you saw. Others also feel what you feel. And when two people who recognize the absurd meet, something special happens. A connection that goes beyond words. It's like two travelers lost in the same dark forest. They don't have maps. They don't know the way. But they find comfort in walking together, in sharing the experience of being lost, in not having to pretend they know where they're going. There's honesty in this encounter. There's solidarity. Shared lucidity is a type of love. Not necessarily romantic. It's deeper than that. It's the recognition that both carry the same weight, face the same condition, ask the same questions. And they don't need to explain themselves. They know. And knowing that the other knows creates a silent but powerful bond. Camus believed that awareness of the absurd should make us more compassionate, not more cynical. Because when you understand your own fragility, your own confusion, your own desperate search for meaning, it becomes easier to understand that others are like this too. Everyone is improvising. Everyone is trying to cope. Everyone is, deep down, lost. This perception should end a lot of judgment. Who are we to judge others' choices when we ourselves don't have answers? Who are we to criticize others' paths when our own path is uncertain? There's a humility born from recognizing we're all in the same boat. And there's a beauty in sharing the absurd. When you can talk with someone about these things without needing to pretend everything is okay, without needing to maintain a facade, without needing to have ready answers. Just two consciousnesses meeting in the void, recognizing each other. It's one of the few real comforts we have. When words end, when all explanations are exhausted, when there's nothing more to say, silence remains. And there's something profoundly true in silence. It doesn't lie. It doesn't promise what it can't deliver. It doesn't offer false answers. It simply is. Silence is the language of the universe. It doesn't speak in words. It doesn't offer verbal consolations. It doesn't explain anything. But there's a fullness in it, a completeness, as if silence contained everything without needing to articulate anything. It's like looking at the ocean, vastness that can't be translated into words. And there's something healing in silence. When you stop trying to explain, to solve, to understand, and simply sit with what is, something calms down. The mind that was agitated seeking answers rests. The heart that was anxious for certainties relaxes. And in silence, you discover a peace that doesn't come from having answers, but from not needing them. After everything we've explored, after looking at the absurd from all angles, we arrive at the most fundamental choice of all: how to live. Camus had a simple and profound answer: live despite everything. Live even without guarantees. Live even knowing there's no ready-made meaning. Live because you're here and you have this unique and unrepeatable opportunity to exist. The yes to existence isn't naive. It doesn't come from ignorance or illusion. It comes from complete lucidity. You saw the absurd. You recognized the lack of meaning. You accepted mortality. And even so, you choose life. This is the most courageous and noblest gesture possible. It's the ultimate rebellion against nothingness. Living despite everything is waking up in the morning and deciding that today is worthwhile. That you're going to do something with this day, even if that something is simply being present. That you're going to find moments of beauty, of connection, of meaning, even knowing they're temporary. That you're going to love, create, think, feel, because that's what you can do while you're alive. Life as a poetic act is living as if your existence were a work of art. Not perfect, not planned, not understood by everyone, but authentic, genuine, yours. You're not following a script written by someone else. You're improvising, creating, inventing as you go. And there's a beauty in this improvisation. The tragic yes to existence recognizes that life is hard, that we'll suffer, that we'll lose, that we'll die. But it says yes anyway. It's tragic because it sees all the tragedy, but it's yes because it chooses to embrace even the tragedy. It's like dancing in the rain, knowing you're going to get wet. You dance anyway, because dancing is better than standing still complaining about the rain. You can be your own happy Sisyphus. You can look at your life, with all its challenges and repetitions and absurdities, and choose to find satisfaction in it. Not because it got easier, but because you changed your relationship with it. Because you stopped expecting it to be different from what it is. Because you accepted that this is how it is and decided to do the best you can with it. And in the end, what matters most isn't whether you discovered the ultimate meaning of existence. It's whether you lived, whether you were really present, whether you loved, created, connected, whether you were authentic, whether you had the courage to be yourself in a world that constantly tries to transform you into something else. Whether you said yes when it would have been easier to say no. Life is absurd. That's not going to change. But you can transform the absurd into dance. You can transform suffering into art. You can transform loneliness into connection. You can transform emptiness into space to create. You can transform the lack of meaning into freedom to create your own meaning. We've reached the end of this journey through Camus' thought and through the experience of the absurd. If you got this far, you already know there are no easy answers. There's no magic solution to the problem of existence, but maybe you found something more valuable than answers. The courage to live with the questions. Life doesn't need to make perfect sense to be worthwhile. It's worthwhile because you're here, now, capable of thinking, feeling, choosing. So live. Live with open eyes and a courageous heart. Live like Sisyphus, carrying your stone with dignity and even with joy. Because in the end, That's the only possible victory, to have truly lived. If this text touched something in you, if it made you think differently about your own life, consider subscribing to the channel. There are many other profound ideas waiting to be explored together, which you can check out in our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment.